Maria Schneider, welcome to Texas.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, we know you're here with the residency and looking forward to hearing the concert tonight. And
Yeah.
I'm always curious, how did you know you were a composer? How did you know you wanted to create sounds?
I think it started at a young age. My piano teacher started teaching me theory from my first lesson. And I, just kind of took to it. She encouraged me to write songs and she'd let me play them on my recitals. And, so that was the seed, and then years later it kind of developed. But yeah, I think it was her. And also in college, I went in as a theory major. I thought, wow, I'd love to be a composer, but I feel like it's somehow too lofty of a goal. And then I had a student teacher, and she said, you really show talent as a composer in your theory exercises. Why don't you consider, adding that to your major? And so, it was encouragement really from a fellow student, an upper grad, a grad student.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
When you compose, do you physically do you like to be at the piano, or is it pencil and paper, or are you someone that just kind of goes to the computer and say, oh yeah, this is what I want?
Pencil, paper at the piano. I don't use computer for composing. I hire somebody to copy it. Everything is by hand, and I use the piano quite a lot, to hear what I'm doing. And but a lot of my ideas come from in other places, and then I go home and I transcribe it down, and it can be anywhere, but definitely not the computer. I'm just not. It's not my way.
Oh yeah, I've talked to a lot of folks that it's so much more not only tactile, but there's so many more things that happen when you're writing with your hand than
I'm
opposed to
sure.
losing that sort of in your manuscript that it just sort of goes away a little bit, the personality.
Yeah, because I put a big board up on my piano. It's like a writing board, and I use big score paper that just has staves but no bar lines. And then I sketch my ideas, kind of spatially notating, and I experiment and I draw arrows, and this might come before this, and what if I try this upside down? So it's sketching. It's like putting together a sculpture and saying, oh, maybe this here a little bit, no, maybe this on top of this, and no, let's try this over. And if you can't do that. Well, you can do that probably with a computer if you're very, very adept at the computer. And I'm not. And I think that the computer feeds you, the notation feeds you too much. Like you're looking, if you say, okay, my meter right now is 2/4, it's 2/4 until you change it. So it's putting it in your head, meter. And I think one of the dangers of writing music is that you write, that I think a composer should conceive of sound and use notation to bring that sound into some kind of notation so players can, reform the sound through their instruments. Being if you're faced with all that notation in front of you, I think it's too easy to be limited by the notation. You can stretch notation to do anything that you hear, but you have to start from that place. So I don't know, that's my way.
Yeah. I don't think George Crumb, if he'd been writing on a computer, would have
Yeah.
made a big spiral or made a dark and the stave white and the
Yeah.
notes differently. Have
Yeah.
you just it makes it look like a nice 1890s
Yeah.
printing, but for
Yeah.
the creation, and
Yeah.
I think it's neat to be able to look at Beethoven's sketches
Oh yeah.
and see where Brahms erased something.
See the frustration on the paper. Yeah, you can see it really.
but we might not have all those deletions or things that are left in the computer
Yeah.
if that's the
Yeah.
medium. Working in sort of the jazz world and working in the classical world, are there times where it's like, oh, can't you guys loosen up a little bit? This is should be a little more. Can't you swing this a little bit? Or are there times that they're like, oh, come on, Maria, you're being so square with this. Can we,
Yeah, a
are
little
there
bit.
is there sometimes a tightrope that you have to sort of walk?
Yeah, I mean, the interpretation of rhythms is different. There's no question. Not every rhythm, but you know, like I remember there was a passage in the Drummond, ba dee 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 do da dee da. They're more apt to do da dee do da dee da, which is very right, as opposed to da dee do da dee da. Just kind of, jazz musicians are used to playing things in front and behind the bar line, getting inside of it and trying to find that place where it sings. And classical musicians do too, but I think it's more like classical musicians aren't used to composers who want them to take liberties. So they're kind of like an animal, like that elephant. Oh, this is, maybe I'm completely wrong, but you have an elephant and you keep him in a cage, and then you take the cage away, and he still stays there. It's a little bit like that, that I think they're so used to, like Dawn said to me that, she was so used to composers wanting it the same every single time. And then I come along and I'm like, no, do it different every time. Yeah, lay that phrase behind, oh yeah, come in 2 beats later, or something. That sounds good, And so, and of course that feels uncomfortable to somebody who's been told for a lifetime that's wrong, So it's, it was very different for me. And for them, I'm sure working with me, especially on the Drummond where I was conducting, oh my God, it was like conducting big band and conduct with a rhythm section and conducting classical musicians. Talk about another world, because in jazz, when I go, boom, it's boom. In classical, it's boom. Everything's behind. So I kept, it was so, have you ever talked on the phone and you hear your voice back late?
Yeah.
And you hear behind you, and you can't keep talking because you keep going back, and then it's slower. And, that's what I felt like conducting. And they said, oh, just keep going, and you conduct in front. I'm like, I can't. It's physically impossible. It was so hard for me to do that. But, we got it, and, I learned a little bit. And, it was hard, though. Very hard. They are different worlds, and there are schools that are trying to close the gap. University of Miami, this guy Shelley Berg is their dean. He's a great classical or jazz pianist. He's probably a great classical pianist too, because he has incredible technique, and he is just trying to really, get the more collaboration between the two parts. And so he wants me to come down with his music and work, because it'll bring both sides of the school together. So,
oh yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
You mentioned talking with Dawn and her performing these songs, which are so wonderful. And I think these I can't wait for, I think the next generation's going to be picking these up. I think we're going to be hearing other sopranos that want to sing these songs.
I hope so. I've gotten 2 people have now asked me to write Winter Morning Walks for piano and voice. And so I think I might be able to do it for piano, cello, and voice, because I think I need one instrument other than piano in there. And I hope people will sing it, And then the other piece, I've been asked to write it for violin, viola, cello, piano, flute, and clarinet.
Oh, so, sure, yeah, Pierrot, sort of a Pierrot group.
With Drummond music. But anyway, yeah, the Drummond piece. So I think I'm going to do that too. So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I was curious, when you write something like this, does it help sometimes to know who's going to perform it? Does it help to know who the soprano or who the ensemble might be?
Well, definitely. I mean, this music, I wouldn't have written it, if it was Dawn's voice, that she has that human natural sound, She doesn't sound affected. She doesn't sound operatic. You know what I mean? She sounds just there, and so I could write these pieces that were very straightforward for her. And if I'm doing, and then Drummond, I had those 3 players, or not Drummond, the Winter Morning Walks. I had Frank Kimbrough, Scott, Scott Robinson, and Jay Anderson. Yeah, clarinet, bass, piano, guys from my band, and I know them, and so what's going to be hard is rewriting that piano part, because there's a lot of spatial notation in it where Dawn is kind of going ahead and behind and just singing things as she feels them, and the piano is kind of following with some improvisation. So what I have to do, I guess, is write something out, come up with something, but ask them to play it as if, as if they're improvising or something. I don't know. I've got to, or maybe give some notes, stack up some notes and tell them to undulate. And, certainly a classical musician can do that. And they do that. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, sort of a 21st century continuo.
Something like that.
Maybe, yeah.
Something like that.
Oh,
yeah.
Cool.
That's
Well,
funny.
that'll be great to hear.
What's your background? You're clearly
I love to compose.
Okay.
I'm a violinist myself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So and public radio, it's just one of those great things. But it gives me a chance to hear all this amazing music, and I think it was one of those things I had heard about, and actually am friends with one of the horn players that was filling in the St. Paul recording.
Really?
So
Which
I'd heard Mike Gast.
Oh yeah. He's a nice guy.
He's a wonderful player, and he told me he'd sort of put out this thing that's like, oh hey, we're recording this great CD, and I think you met Daniel Gilliam up in Minnesota as well, and he'd said, oh, you've got to interview Maria and talk with her, and so it was one of those things.
Nice.
Once it came out, I was just like, oh, I got to hear this, and it was a real joy. It just there's something incredibly fresh, I think, about this music that I was curious if. Do you describe your style? I mean, we try to put things in books. It is, because we try to put things in boxes. And again, like I said, trying to balance that jazz and classical world. Is there a way that you sort of try to describe your music to, like?
Well, before this, I always called it orchestral jazz, but now it doesn't really fit. I don't know what to call it, especially Drummond. Drummond. I don't know what to call that, because it's nothing highly unusual, yet there isn't really anything quite like it. It's got touches of things probably, but it was funny because I read some review and they said, well, the Drummond sounds like, she borrowed from this and this and this. They're all things I never listened to. So I did, and it's like, oh, okay, I guess, because it's just kind of an amalgamation of what I've listened to over the years and written. So that would be a hodgepodge of jazz, like, Gil Evans and people like that. String writers out of the jazz world, Klaus Ogerman, Klaus. And then, composers from Brazil like Egberto Gismonti, maybe touches of Ravel, because I love Ravel, and then there's some flamenco and flamenco rhythms in the piece Don't Kill Yourself, and then touches of choro, which is a early Brazilian music, and then, my own jazz harmony, and then probably things I've listened to over the years, from Chopin to Puccini to, Copland to who knows what, and it just all gets kind of messed up there in some highly inappropriate way, and comes out and you kind of cough the music up like a hairball, and there you've got Drummond. I don't know how it happens, but it's that's a horrible description. A hairball. Oh. Or like an owl pellet. You see everything it's eaten. You know all the bones of the different animals. My music's like an owl pellet.
That would be a great score. That would be a great piece.
Yes, owl pellet. Oh God! But anyway, Winter Morning Walks. That one, has more of what I'm used to writing. It has some pop, and they both have some pop in them too. I think the one Souvenir of the Ancient World from Drummond, that's like a pop tune in a way, and so is Walking by Flashlight in the Winter Morning Walks. I wrote songs, they're kind of songs, they're not, you could call them art song. I don't know what do you guys call that?
Yeah, it's hard, it's kind of this postmodern, it's hard to label. I'm not a big fan of labeling. I think, well, let the musicologists figure all that out in another 10 years. We just right now enjoy the music. Have that. Sort of. Yeah. To me, it's also as you were talking about sort of this amalgamation. To me, it's very organic. That it sounds incredibly easy.
Yeah.
Not that it's not complex, but I think it's so wonderful. Not that it's overly accessible, but I just think it sounds.
It is accessible.
Wonderful, it is, and it's just, it sounds very natural to have all this sort of come together, and I was just like, it just made me stop and listen. Sometimes I'll try to multitask a little bit, and this I was like, I want to listen. I want to be caught in the emotion of this.
Yeah, I would say my music is very intricate, and, but. It is accessible, and it's not that I try to write to make things accessible, but I try to write to carry people into my story. I take great pains. I really, in my music, really want to communicate something, if I'm feeling something, or if I have an image I want to evoke, or a feeling I want to evoke, or in the case of this poetry, I really loved all this poetry so much. So I really wanted to create a world, and I go to great pains that the listener can trust that I'm going to take them somewhere. I hate when I listen to music and I don't really trust the first few decisions of a composer. So then I kind of feel on edge, and suddenly I'm away from the music and I'm not really in it because I'm kind of judging it and saying, I'm on the outside. I don't want people to be on the outside of my music. I would much rather that somebody sits down to criticize my music, and before they know it, they're in it. Maybe daydreaming or whatever and lost in it, but lost in it. I don't want people to think about it, and if somebody said to me, your music's very interesting, I would be like, that's really a bummer, because that's not what I want to hear. But I think my music is interesting. I spend a lot of time crafting, and it's full of, Ted Koozer's poetry, it really speaks to me, and I think it has something similar in it. Not that I profess to be equal to Ted Koozer in the music world, because I just completely adore him. I love that his poetry is so smart, the metaphors and everything, the way he speaks, the way he sees things, the little things he notices, and how he crafts a poem, however you say that. But then, when you take it, it's so accessible, it's not, you don't feel like somebody's trying to show you how incredibly intelligent they are. He just is intelligent. He doesn't have to show it.
Yeah, and it speaks to the mind and heart.
Yeah,
So.
Exactly. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. But, doing this project was very scary for me, because when I was in college, that attitude was highly, highly discouraged in classical music. I don't want to say because of my teachers, because my teachers were open-minded. At the University of Minnesota, I had Dominic Argento, as
Sure.
a classical, as an orchestration teacher, and a man named Paul Fettler. And he was a student of Hindemith at one time. He's older. He lives in Florida, but he was the one that heard how influenced I was by jazz and said, you should go over and write for the big band. So I don't think he was doing it because he was trying to get rid of me. I mean, he remained my teacher, but I think he was recognizing, not saying, Maria, really you should put that away because, this tonality thing doesn't really fit, our times. He didn't do that. He said, wow, she clearly loves this kind of harmony, loves this kind of sensibility in the music. What would be a great place for her, the big band? And it's pretty funny that's how I came to the big band, was a Hindemith guy, or a Hindemith student. So
Yeah. Well, I guess I'd end asking about what you'd recommend for young composers, because I know there have been, obviously the rise in technology is huge these days, but folks like Philip Glass, Steve Reich, they started their own band.
Yeah.
That they if they wanted their music played,
mm-hmm.
they, had their own ensemble to sort of work with it. Now, gosh, if you're in the glass ensemble, that's pretty cool, but, go back, to the 70s, here is guy trying to, get his stuff played, and you get to hear your music, and you get, if they're in your band, they're probably going to be your friends, or, know you a little bit and say, oh, no, this doesn't really work, or, hey,
Yeah.
can we try this? What do you recommend for a young person in sort of maybe in that third stream, or, the composition? What do you recommend?
It was the same thing for me. I was studying with Bob Brookmeyer. I was working with Gil Evans, but then at a certain point I said, I want to find my own voice. And so I started a band, and contemporaries of mine were in that band, and most of us still are working together 25 years later, and I found my voice, and they helped me find my voice. I think one of the things that is so wonderful when you have a group like that is you have the time. It's like a soup that sits in a pot for a long time, and the flavors start to mix. You start to be influenced by these players. They are influenced by you, which brings back, and before you know it, you're all really a part of this whole creation, and I really credit my musicians to helping me find where I am, is largely because of how they approached my music. And I've learned so much from them. And yeah, I think having your own group is the best way. Because if you're always writing for other groups, you never get quite you never get the chance to really develop a piece. You know what I mean? You hear it once, and you hear, especially in the classical world, wow.
That bar line, when it's done, it's like, well, you go back and they're like, oh, well, maybe I should change this. And, if you do have a group that is, performing, you can say, oh, yeah, well, let's, next time I'm going to fix this.
I do
by
that
the next
all the
rehearsal,
time.
Be like, and sometimes it's hard, to just go ahead and move on to the next piece, but there's, they're like, okay, no, we can fix this dress, or we can, sort of mend this, hem or something like that, that it can be always fiddled with a little bit.
It's so funny because last night I was falling asleep, and I thought of an answer to something I've been asked 1,000 times that I never had an answer for, and all of a sudden I realized the answer, and that is, how do you know when a piece is done? And I realized that, like with this record, mixing it and everything, it was just every little thing, or with the music, every little thing that didn't feel right would keep me awake at night. I'd be in bed at night and just like, oh, shoot, what should I do? Should that rhythm be before? Should I have the extra bar, or shouldn't I have the extra bar? And then it would mull it over and obsess on it, and the little gerbil going around and around the brain. And then I realized it's done when I can sleep and not think about it anymore. That's when it's done. And that really is the barometer for me when I'm not, when it's no longer it's no longer making me miserable, and keeping me up at night. And so the record, I realized last night I've quit thinking about is this too loud? Is this too soft? Should this relative volume of this song be louder or softer? And now I can just listen to it and not think about it. So I'm like, okay, no regrets. I got it done, and it is what I want it to be because it's not keeping me awake.
Oh man, well, it is wonderful to meet you, and
You too.
congratulations on this wonderful album. It's
Thank you.
awesome, and we can't wait for more.
Thank you. Yeah, the next will be my big band again. I'm feeling so guilty because I'm not writing for them. You know, I spent so much time and money on this, so I need the money to come back so I can afford to do another band album. But yeah, that'll be the next.
How cool.
So thank you.